What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button, like our content, share, talk about it, be about it, each one, teach one, and please join us as a member. If you haven't already, we put a lot of our videos up early there so you can watch them before the rest of the world can. Now, today on the 1st and 15th, man, this one I've been thinking about doing for a while, so I'm glad I'm doing it now. But basically, back in 1987, when I was a young youth, as the Wu would say, Kool Moe Dee put out his How You Like Me Now album. And in addition to the crazy album cover where he had his Jeep and LL Cool J's red Kango, or at least presumably LL Cool J's red Kango under his front right tire, there was something else very interesting in this album and about this album, which was Kool Moe Dee's report card. Now, in 1987, of course, rap was still in its infancy, especially when it came to putting out albums, because there hadn't been that many rap albums released. But 1987, I would say, was a year, and really we get the explosion in 1988 of when all these albums started coming like an avalanche. But 87 is kind of the precipice of it, and we started getting many, many more. And many of those artists are included in Kool Moe Dee's breakdown. Most of these artists had been out for a while, or at least were emerging, and most of them had at least one album at this time. But I remember thinking when I got this report card thing and I saw it because I bought the vinyl, and I just remember thinking, like, man, this is crazy that he did a report card evaluating what he thought of all the rappers, and he broke it down into 10 categories: vocabulary, articulation, creativity, originality, versatility, voice, records, stage presence, sticking to themes, and innovative rhythms. Now, given that those are a lot of categories, it added up to 100%, and it was kind of a report card where you got an ABC, standard grading, 10-point grading scale. But let's start with the low. And this was shocking to me, but in a lot of ways not necessarily surprising, that the lowest group that Kool Moe Dee gave a grade to was, drumroll please, the Beastie Boys. And they got 70. 70, Kool Moe Dee? That was preposterous to me, especially with License to Ill, which had so many amazing songs, and most noteworthy possibly would be Paul Revere. So that song alone should have gotten him 70 points. But I digress. Kool Moe Dee gave them 6 for vocabulary, 6 for originality, 6 for versatility, 6 for voice, and for innovating rhythms. All of which I think is ridiculous, preposterous, and borderline silly. But that was Kool Moe Dee's opinion at the time. Of course, the Beastie Boys had rankled a lot of feathers because they were white, because they were so successful, because they seemed to be getting all these opportunities that other rappers weren't, likely because they were white, but also because they were getting, touring with Madonna, selling millions of records in an era where rap records, generally speaking, did not. And they were getting embraced in MTV in a way that arguably I would say really only Run-DMC with Walk This Way had been doing at around the same time. So yeah, they definitely had all these advantages, but to discount their artistic merit, I didn't think or agree with. The other two notable lower grades we'll get to in a second, but the other one was the Boogie Boys, who Kool Moe Dee, really dinged for their vocabulary, voice, and stage presence. I didn't see the Boogie Boys perform ever, so I can't speak on that, but I could definitely see that they, I liked them, but, for those that know the Boogie Boys, check them out, or reminisce, but, they definitely were not the cream of the crop, in my opinion, even though I liked some of their material. But the other two lowest grades in this report card are shocking, and again, maybe not surprising in retrospect and when I think back to these times, but shocking nonetheless. The less shocking of the two was that he gave Ultramagnetic, which he labeled as Ultramagnetic, not Ultramagnetic MCs, which I always wondered about too, but he gave them an 80, a B, the lowest B you can get. Now, I was like, what? So he gave them articulation, voice, and stage presence. I did not see Ultramagnetic because I didn't get to see concerts for several years, unfortunately, because I was very young at the time when the report card came out, so I can't speak to that. But voice and articulation, the voice of said G, super husky, muscular, great, bouncing off of primarily Kool Keith, who was high pitched and just in his own world. What? He didn't like their voices? I thought that was crazy, but to each his own. And to come out with the 80, I just was like, these dudes, even in 1987 with their singles that they had been putting out, I was like, man, these dudes are onto something that's very distinctive, very different and wild, but maybe it just wasn't Kool Moe Dee's thing at the time. Understand. The other one that's crazy though is Public Enemy also got an 80, and they got a 7 for vocabulary, for stage presence, and innovating rhythms. Now, Public Enemy would have had Yo Bum Rush the Show at the time, so we haven't got to It Takes a Nation of Millions to hold us back yet. But vocabulary, I thought was interesting. But just in general, Yo Bum Rush the Show obviously has a lot of great songs that stand the test of time and have been sampled ad nauseum. And not only Chuck D's voice, but the sound and the aesthetic of the album, I thought would have warranted them getting higher, but to each his own, not for Kool Moe Dee. And I'm very intrigued to see what he would have said later. But the highest grades, now let's get to those, because the treacherous three, I guess you would say, of this would be the three artists that he gave the highest grades to. First is Melle Mel, who he gave a 95, a A plus. The lowest grade he gave him was for records, which, okay, I get it. Even though he did the message, I would also say that as we are in 1987, given that Melle Mel had been rapping since the 70s, since before records existed for rap, yeah, I would say that was probably one of his weaker things, which is something he also dinged one of the other people he gave the highest grade to, which is Grandmaster Caz. He also gave him the lowest rating of his 10 categories, which was records, and he gave Grandmaster Caz a 7. And I could also see and understand and appreciate that because, like Melle Mel, Grandmaster Caz's output on record was, not nearly as stellar as all the tapes I had from Cold Crush, listening to them back in the day. And shout out my boy B Love for giving me a lot of those, not right as they were happening, but later when I was starting to meet him and hang out with him a lot, he gave me a lot of the old cassette tapes that he had recorded from various sources. But anyway, the other one of the three that got the highest is, perhaps not surprisingly, Kool Moe Dee. Now, what's interesting and what's consistent here is he gave himself the lowest grades were 8s for him, but he gave it for records and for stage presence. The stage presence is interesting because one of the more notable things that the artists before 1979 with the Fatback Band, King Tim III, and Sugar Hill Gang exploded with records is that the stage obviously is what helped to make these guys superstars because of their routines and the things they would do live. So I was a little surprised, and again, I didn't get to see, unfortunately, Kool Moe Dee perform in person at the time, but that was somewhat surprising to me that he would ding himself and lower his grade on that. But the other thing, which is a consistent theme with the other two guys, Melle Mel and Grandmaster Caz, is that Kool Moe Dee dinged himself for records. And I think it's ironic or perhaps telling that the three of them, Melle Mel, Grandmaster Caz, Kool Moe Dee, he gave the lowest rating for records. And 1987 is when rap really exploded commercially and broke through gargantuanly. The following year, in 1988, when records became one of the key things, because granted, it was limited, but you wanted to get your song played on the radio, preferably 2 or 3 songs if you could. And then, of course, you wanted to get your videos out and in rotation, but you needed songs, you needed strong records to do that. And the fact that Melle Mel, Grandmaster Caz, and Kool Moe Dee, according to Kool Moe Dee's evaluation, didn't have, that was their weakest component of their 10-point evaluation for Kool Moe Dee's report card. I think that's telling that that's something that they weren't as strong with, whereas a lot of the other artists that are broken down had great records, obviously. Now, one of the other interesting things to note here that I wanted to highlight are actually a few. One, that despite his rivalry, despite putting what's presumed to be a LL Cool J Kango under his Jeep on the album cover for How You Like Me Now, is the fact that LL Cool J actually got 90%. So 9 out of 10. And this would have been around the time Bigger and Deffer would have been coming out, but Radio was certainly out. LL was already a superstar, but on his super upward trajectory. But I couldn't believe, even in real time, this stunned me that Kool Moe Dee gave LL Cool J a 6 for originality. Now, having talked to Kool Moe Dee and spent a little bit of time with him over the years, I could understand his perspective and his opinion on that in retrospect. But as somebody listening to the records, nah. I was like, nah, what is this guy talking about? But otherwise, and deservedly so, I might add, I think that Kool Moe Dee did give LL a lot of 10s, and that's why he ended up having, despite a 6 in originality, he ended up having a 90 as his evaluation. And then another thing of note that was really surprising to me about Kool Moe Dee's report card was he had some misspellings of the names, or not complete names. As I mentioned earlier, he just called them Ultramagnetic instead of Ultramagnetic MCs, which was her full name. And then he misspelled Rakim's name, Rakhim, which I thought was odd. And also Bismarck instead of Bismarcky. So I know maybe he kind of misheard or misunderstood or whatever, but I also know that these guys had their name on records, and Kool Moe Dee being a scholar and being a highly intelligent guy, that just always surprised me that he had said that in something that was written. That really threw me off. And another thing of note, conspicuous by his absence is Busy Bee. So I don't know if that was in the mind of Kool Moe Dee, he doesn't even deserve to get graded because he's so not good, or is that just another diss to Busy Bee, or is that just some unfortunate oversight? I would imagine it was not an oversight, it was intentional. So hopefully one day I'll get to ask Kool Moe Dee about that. But I always thought that was hilarious and kind of was a somewhat of another nail or final nail in the coffin of their rivalry. But anyway, I thought it was hilarious. So, as I do here on the 1st and 15th, I like to talk about a lot of things from rap history and from modern and current times that come up. And as I was thinking about the Kool Moe Dee report card, and obviously he did a book about it later, and he's talked about this over the years here and there, but I definitely wanted to weigh in on some of the things I thought, from the lowest graded groups to the highest graded groups, as well as some things I thought were interesting oversights / noteworthy just in general. So anyway, there it is. You can catch me always on all social media at Soren Baker. Definitely hit us up in the comment section. Let us know what you think of this video. Either myself or one of the people at Unique Access will hit you back. Definitely let us know, because this is something that I remember studying and looking at this report card for probably hours as I would get new albums, or as I was listening to Kool Moe Dee's album, and I would see who I agreed with and disagreed with. So always found it very interesting. Definitely follow us, like, subscribe, share, join a Unique Access, become a member, and check us out, man. I'm Soren Baker here on the 1st and 15th, and we appreciate your support.